Hi, this is Henry Silverman, and I'd just like to give some final thoughts about the genetics module we just went through and the issue of broad consent. So I'd like to show a few slides from this presentation by Mark Bonds, and I'll upload this to the website as well. So he talks about the new regulatory broad consent and the old non-regulatory broad consent and challenges of broad consent as well. These next few slides shows the additional elements um, required for the broad consent, and it includes these four elements here: general description of the types of research that may be conducted. Another element is whether sharing of identifiable private information or identifiable biospecimens might occur. On this slide, we see other elements such as risk and benefits and confidentiality. And then on the next slide, we see that this one talks about return of results, and it says a statement that clinically relevant research results may not be disclosed to the subject. And then we see here the interesting issue of what happens if a participant refuses to consent, in which case the IRB cannot waive consent for the storage maintenance for secondary research. However, the researchers could simply choose to de-identify the subject's data, in which case one could use the data. So essentially, the concept is that biospecimens are being stored, and the participant is being asked whether they agree to broad consent. And if the answer is no, then one cannot use that those specimens for research anymore, unless one chooses to de-identify the specimens. So then there's a whole section about challenges of regulatory broad consent. And these few slides essentially talks about the IT system capacity necessary to involve tracking of the responses, those who accept it, as well as the refusal to consent, must be tracked over the lifetimes of persons who give broad consent, and also those persons who refuse to give such consent. And this slide brings up the issue of whether an individual's silence, non-responsiveness, and or express declination to give broad consent would constitute refusal to consent. So if a participant doesn't give explicit refusal, there's no guidance as to whether one could use the biospecimens for research use. And then the final thing I want to briefly go over is that with the new final common rule, two additional exemptions that were developed. This slide discusses the exemption categories for secondary use of identifiable biospecimens. Such research is exempt from the common rule if the investigator does not include returning individual results to the subjects as part of the study plan. The reason for that is that if research does include returning research results, it cannot be exempt because the IRB would want to know the plans for returning individual research results so that they could make a determination as to whether the plan is appropriate. For example, whether it includes genetic counselors to help the participant understand the information. So those are the few points I want to go over, and as I said before, I will post this recording as well as post this slide set. Okay, thank you very much.